Hey, this is the Entertainment Advice Channel. What I want to talk about today is the problem with history movies. So when it comes to the problem with history movies, um, the truth of the matter is the biggest problem with history movies might surprise you, okay? And the biggest problem with history movies when it comes to the topic of why they are not made that much anymore is actually the history community itself, okay? That is the biggest problem I have to say about history movies if you're someone who's a big fan of history movies, okay? Now let me explain why, okay? Because the first thing I want to get started with comes to my explanation of why I have this take that I do is it simply comes down to the fact that history movies are like all movies, okay? They are supposed to be entertaining, okay? For that matter, okay? For that matter, okay? To be quite honest with you, as I'm certain you're all aware, okay? Um, and when you make a movie, the purpose of making a movie is to make it not only have the most interesting storyline as possible, you know, but also have the coolest fight scenes, okay? Because if you don't do that, even if it's a movie that might be entertaining, but it's slow, like it means it takes some time for it, of course, the movie to become interesting, then most people are not going to watch it, which means it's going to be a financial failure. And as a result of it being a financial failure, it's going to make it less likely people are going to actually follow up with that genre. Okay, that's the truth of the matter when it comes to the movie industry. Okay, so as a result, history movies are always going to be full of exaggerations. They're always going to be full of events that not only did not happen, but also things that might over sensationalize things that happen, and as a result of that as well, or I should say something else alongside it, make action scenes that are more interesting to watch, more flashier than they actually would have been in reality. Okay, that's the truth of the matter. That's what common sense would indicate for you. But the thing is, people who tend to watch history movies, specifically the historian type, like people who know a lot about history, for that matter, one thing I have noticed about them is they tend to always universally hate every history movie, okay? No matter how well produced it is, like the story, the action scenes and everything, they always hate every history movie. They always say it's inaccurate, it's full of a lot of plot holes, oh, people didn't actually use that type of armor in that period of history, yada yada yada, blah 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 blah. And they always complain about it, okay? Every single history movie that I've seen made, they always complain about it, okay? But the thing, what I always wondered about these people, okay, is that do they realize that this is just a movie? It's not necessarily meant to be completely accurate or not? Because the truth of the matter is, I always find that very interesting, okay? Like, don't these people just realize that when people watch a movie, people just want to watch something interesting for that matter, and not just interesting, but entertaining? People don't actually just want to watch something just because they want to say it's historically accurate, because that's the thing I always found so interesting about those people. And not even just that interesting thing about those historian type people, the fact that they don't seem to understand that fact. They also tend to not also understand as well that this is actually doing a lot of good for history, okay? Because the more we actually have interesting movies to watch that document history, the more likely it will actually encourage greater interest in history, for people. Because to put it bluntly, history has actually historically been regarded as one of the most hated subjects out there. Okay, it's not as bad as math. Oh, Lord have mercy. You'd have to do really bad to be considered as bad as math when it comes to school subjects people hate, but it's definitely up there as one of the most hated subjects out there, okay? People in general on a day-to-day basis have very little interest in history, okay? And when you have those movies produced, it actually encourages a greater interest in history. It encourages people to be fascinated with historical figures and events um, that they don't even have much interest in, okay, for that matter, okay, on a day-to-day basis. Besides, with the world we live in nowadays, people consider anything that's old, that's not very technological, like in other words, to sum up what I'm trying to say, anything that's technologically outdated, lame, for that matter. That's the world we live in. We live in a very superficial world. Everything has to be up to date all the time. If it's not, then it's considered lame and stupid, okay? So that's the truth of the matter. And of course, when it comes to history, things that happened thousands of years ago, that should come as no surprise that people are going to consider that very lame, okay? But at the same time, when you have these history movies made and they deliberately encourage people to be interested in it, it does a lot for the history community and helps bring people, to, of course, become interested in history, which of course will benefit them because people then will start looking up actual real history instead of just having no interest in it, because that's the truth of the matter. History is considered a boring subject, but when you have these history movies, it encourages people to actually be interested and fascinated in history, and that's the truth of the matter. So that's the point I'm trying to get across here. It does a lot of good, as well, okay? And that's something I just want to explain. So for that matter, I don't know why these historian people tend to hate these movies so much, for that matter, okay? I just never understood it. Like, why do they hate it so much when it's promoting that? Not to mention, if they are so against the way these movies are made, then why don't they make their own freaking movies? Why don't these big time YouTubers like Metatron, oh God, I hate that guy, or any of these other big YouTubers who don't even have any interesting topics to talk about for history, they just pretty much just sit there either doing one or two things, okay? Either just saying this is impossible, this would never happen in real life, or of course, just talking about how horrible history was because they don't have any originality and creativity whatsoever. These history YouTubers, oh my God, they suck ass. They're very lame. Most of them are like that, especially Metatron. He's a loser, which I don't even go too much into my opinions about him, specifically since he's not an alt-right person. He's not right-wing. Anyway, he's a loser. I don't pay attention to him. But the truth of the matter is, even aside from my personal critiques of these history YouTubers, my personal thoughts, in other words, to be more specific, the truth of the matter is, why don't you hear them make their own movies? Why don't you hear them actually direct movies and have them be historically accurate, as they would say? Because they can't do it. As the saying goes, it's easier to talk than actually do. And that's the truth of the matter. That's why no one watches, why they don't make their own movies. And if they made it, it would probably be extremely boring and just not just extremely boring, but just extremely lame and pretentious and just a straight up snooze fest for that matter, okay? Because the truth of the matter is, as the saying goes, it's easier to talk than do. Besides, the main point of the matter, like I was getting at for my video, is of course the purpose of history movies is to make something interesting for people to watch, okay? Which as a result benefits the history community because more people are willing to learn more about history instead of just hearing horrible history facts. Did you know people in the past used to bathe in pee, or talking about either debunking this particular movie and saying, oh, this would never happen in real life, like that fucking loser Metatron does, and a few others as well who I won't name. Truth be told, when you actually have an interesting history movie, it actually does something, and it encourages people to be interested in history, and instead of just simply saying history sucks and making the youth lose interest in it. And that's the truth of the matter. So in short, that is what I have to say, okay, when it comes to my main point of the problem with history movies, okay? Now that we're done talking about that, let's get to the moral of the story, okay? And the moral of the story is there's a lesson to be learned from this story, okay? Which is that if you want something in life, which a lot of history lovers tend to want, movies about history and want history to be more popular in the media and so on and so forth. If you want something like, then don't complain when you get it, okay? And that's the truth of the matter because they always talk about no one appreciates history, we don't learn from history, and those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it, blah, 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 blah. And when they get an opportunity to get to actually get themselves out there, they still complain about it. They still complain, oh, it's not historically accurate enough and this and that. But at the end of the day, it's a movie. At least it's promoting, the stuff out there in real life for that matter. You're, of course, the subject that you're so fascinated with. Okay. So in the end of the day, do not complain about something if you want something in the end of the day. That's the truth of the matter, to be quite blunt and honest with you. In other words, as the old saying goes, don't bite the hand that feeds you. And that's the honest truth of the matter, okay? So that is all I have to say for this video. And simply put it, if you like this video and videos like this, remember to thumbs this video up and hit the subscribe button. And this is all I have to say. And simply put, I'm out. So bye.